Folks, we are live. Welcome to Talking Crit. My God, we have a show in
What's
the
wrong? Why
works
am I here?
for you. I am Eric Tenkar, your bartender in the OSR. Adjacent to me is none other than Bad Mike Battleato, my once-a-week work spouse.
Who
And,
needs a
and
haircut? I need a haircut. I just looked and oh my god.
Mike,
This is
Mike, let's just say last
Oh
night.
my god. You haven't had yours cut in a year though, right? You're
Right, yeah,
you're
no,
working on a
I
year.
had a cut for North Texas last year. And
Wow.
holding us up as always. Not holding up the show. I mean,
He's Atlas, yes. Or
he's
Atlas.
Atlas, yes, with the one and only Jim Kitchen.
I wish we had something to talk about this week.
We absolutely nothing.
So do we want to talk OGL first and sort of get that out of the way? Do we want to dive into other?
No, I want to talk. Well, let's just talk CSIO Goodman Games right off the bat because I think I saw Eric's video this week, and I think there's a lot of misconceptions out there about a lot of stuff, and I would hope that we need to set that straight because I was reading the comments on that video and they were idiotic because
On both sides.
well, yes, but people what they're concentrating on is not what most gamers are upset about when it comes to this. And Eric, you need to probably set the stage for this because this is something that's been going on for 10
years. Go back 11 years?
Actually, I think
is that where we start? Do we go back 11 years in time?
Yeah, 11 years. We can go back 11 years. Yes.
We can go back 11 years in time. Heck, we could go back nearly 5 years in time since the last update.
Let's go back 11 years in time. Okay. That's the place we start.
All right. 11 years ago in a galaxy far, far away, the city-state of the Invincible Overlord was kickstarted by Judges Guild Games.
Why don't we bring that up on screen to sort of have that as an image? There's key points about all of this that we should hit as we're going through.
Hold on. Let me
and folks watching this, let's be really clear. Number one, we want to talk about the failed Kickstarter. We want to talk about events from 5 years ago, but there is no connection between the failed Kickstarter, events of 5 years ago, and the currently announced project that we will start talking about at some point. But let's bring the Kickstarter up and sort of start there.
Well, it should be up. I thought I fixed that. All right.
Okay. So 11 years ago, Judges Guild dipped their toe into Kickstarter and decided to do a really holly molly throwdown Super Batmojis version of City State of the Invincible Overlord. For those of you who are not familiar with Judges Guild and their role in the early RPG industry, I mean, Mike, jump in and help me pad this out. But essentially, they were the first real third-party concern for expanding what Dungeons and Dragons was. You know,
We Warriors, as a distinction, put out the first D&E module, but Judges Guild put out the first supplement, which is City State of the Invincible Overlord, which I believe is 1976, 77.
Yep.
And they did. This was something that TSR wasn't doing. TSR didn't. The first big city that TSR did wasn't until 1989 when they did City of Greyhawk. So this is something that TSR was not doing. And so they put out City State of Invincible Overlord, which was a gigantic book full of, it was a city. It was a city state, and they described all the homeowners in there, all the store owner. I mean, it was just a really intensive work of love, because it was something that you could use with any version of D&D. And a lot of people, myself included, back in the day, bought that just because we wanted a generic city. It was always odd to me that TSR was just not interested in doing something like this. And like I said, that they didn't do it till 1989 when they did City of Greyhawk. And so the Judges Guild, and not just City of State, but they put out a lot of, obviously this is the first work that Janelle Jaquays did just basically, Janelle Jaquays was just slapping out home runs right and left. You had Caverns of Thracia, you had Dark Tower, you had the Book of Adventure maps. I mean, they're just everything that Janelle did was just classic. Now, Janelle had also started a fanzine called The Dungeoneer that was bought by bought out and by someone else, and then that was actually folded into the Judges Guild brand eventually. And then for a while, Janelle was working for Bob Senior. Now, to let people know, there's a lot of Bobs here, and we're Bob Senior is the one that started and worked with the TSR people to do Judges Guild, and so they were licensed to put out official material. The quality wasn't great, and I would say out of all the material, 20% is amazing, 80%, another 60% is and then the other 20% is really bad. So it was adequate stuff. Most of it wasn't good, but the stuff that Janelle wrote was just absolutely amazing. And to this day, it's still referred to. She did things like basically dungeons. Back then, there would be a dungeon, and here's a bunch of hallways, and they lead here. No, Janelle's stuff did not do that. There would be a secret entrance over here, and there's a drop to a third level here. And so she was very, very big on not having a connective dungeon. And that was something that was very important. But
and Judges Guild gave Kevin Simbita his first paying work in the industry. There was a subscription program, so every month you got stuff. Judges Guild employed over 50 people at one point. Was a thriving concern. Bob Bledsaw is the guy who founded Judges Guild and steered it through a lot. And then, of course, there were changes. TSR said, we don't want you saying you're official anymore. And there were shenanigans.
Yeah, well, once that happened, that pretty much shut down Judges Guild in the early 80s because that's what they relied on, was basically doing licensed D&D product. And they didn't just do D&D also. They did RuneQuest. They did Tunnels and Trolls.
Yes, Traveler.
Traveler did a lot of Traveler. Oh, boy, they do Traveler. I've got tons
a lot of Traveler.
Yeah, so they did. It wasn't just one thing, but basically D&D was what was paying their bills, I would have to say.
So Eric, why don't you pull the screenshot up on camera here, or make that the large thing here.
Yeah, so this was the 15 years ago. This was the Kickstarter that Bob Jr. Bob.
No, it was not Junior. You got to realize that there have been 3 Bob Bledsaws. There's Senior, right, Junior, and the third. And
I'm sorry. You see, I've already got mixed up myself. Yes.
Okay. So City State of the Invincible Overlord on Kickstarter was a project being helmed by Bob Bledsaw III.
Right.
And as you can see, if you can't read it, 965 backers pledged $85,130 to bring the project to life.
There was going to be 2 versions. There was, back at the time, you got to remember, 15 years ago, Pathfinder was king. It was outselling D&D. It was the king. So they were going to do a universal version, which was the first version was a universal version, could be used with any generic role-playing game, and they were going to do a Pathfinder version. So that was the plan, to have this reprinted.
Yes, and so they were going to try to update it. They were going to do new maps, and this Kickstarter is one of the reasons why, we talk about the golden rules of crowdfunding. And number 1 is don't back a project that isn't ready to go. Don't back a project that isn't written.
And it was a different world 15 years ago, as Jim and Eric know.
It was 11 years ago.
11 years ago, sorry. Because a lot of people would base their Kickstarter on a dream. I have a dream.
I have a hope and a dream.
Yes, I hope and a dream. And there's nothing in this hand and this hand. Yes, exactly.
And in the graveyard of unfulfilled Kickstarters, amongst the pencil dice, amongst the many other things, you will find the City State of the Invincible Overlord. Now, there were a number of regular updates that sort of carried you for the first few years, but very quickly things seemed to just go sideways. And in a series of posts, it became clear that there had been mismanagement. I'll use that word. Mismanagement with funds, with the collected funds. And Bob Bledsaw Jr., i.e. Bob Bledsaw II, Bob Bledsaw Jr. made a number of posts that he was taking over the project, that there was no money, that the money there was, I think he actually, one of the Kickstarter updates is I was given control of the funds and there was like $75 or something.
Well, go back a little bit, Jim. The reason this happened was because nothing happened on this for so long, and people were asking questions.
Yes.
And Bob, look, Bob, he's been in North Texas. He still is the person controlling the Judges Guild IP, and he still sold stuff. I mean, he still had a reputation to protect, is what it boiled down to.
Yes.
And when this wasn't coming out, people were starting to question him because he was the one who had a public face. He was the one you would see at conventions. He's the one you could talk to. And so they were like, Bob, what's going on with this? And well, it's my son. It's not me. And so eventually, like you said, Jim, he looked at the funds, saw that it was not
the lack of funds is probably the best. Yes.
So, by the way, they looked for a possible golden backer for a while. What's the word for that? They looked
for a white knight.
They looked for a
white knight. They wanted a white knight.
I know. I have information about. Or I know that they definitely looked for white knight. They were looking for somebody. The problem was they had pledged to pay a Pathfinder version. And at that point, as the years rolled on, Pathfinder was losing ground to the edition. And so the Pathfinder version was suddenly not really what you wanted out of a City State of the Universal Overlord. They would have rather done a 5th edition version and a universal version. But the problem was the backers had pledged for a Pathfinder version. So it was there was a lot of issues here. There was a lot of problems.
So that gets us to about 5 years ago. So Judges Guild had funded. Nothing had been shipped. There were numbers of tiers, including tiers with miniatures and so on and so forth. And everybody associated with the project, everybody who had backed the project, everybody who was behind the scenes working on the project, there were regular updates, we're working on this and so on. But Bob Bledsaw II laid out very clearly that the only way the project was ever going to fulfill was if they completed it with profits from the sale of other Judges Guild items that had nothing to do with the Kickstarter. He was very transparent about that. And so you really got the impression that it was limping along with a few dollars here and a few dollars there. So then we get to about 6 years ago, and Frog God Games decides that they are going to publish a Teagle Manor and do a version of Teagle Manor. They license Teagle Manor. They publish Teagle Manor. But as this is coming about, then we get to the left turn at Albuquerque. Rob Cosman makes a post on his blog, Bat in the Attic.
Rob Conley.
Rob Conley makes a post on Bat in the Attic about some fairly regrettable but easily viewable posts by Bob Bledsaw II and Bob Bledsaw Jr. and Bob Bledsaw III.
Which was wild because I was friends with both on Facebook and I didn't notice the postings or see them.
But the common thread that most people have is if you were friends with Bob, and in 2014 I met Bob at Gen Con. I talked to him. He had spent the entire He had spent the entire show being beat up by Kickstarter backers. And when I talked to him, he was as hangdog and apologetic as he could possibly be, and said, this was my son's doing, but I've stepped in. And to his full credit, he was ready for me to yell at him like everybody else. And I just thought it was sad. I just thought it was terrible, right? Who as a parent hasn't had their child let them down at some point? But Rob reveals some of these things. And I knew people who had been friends with Bob, but we all had sort of done the same thing on Facebook, which is when somebody just keeps posting onerous content that you don't want to see, like your weird great uncle that likes to yell at clouds. and I had unfollowed him, right? Because mostly it was large-breasted women or political memes. And I was like, I don't need any more political memes. I'm good.
By the way, that's why I unfollowed Jim. Large-breasted women and political memes.
Hello.
I just can't deal with it anymore.
Yes. Vast tracts of land.
As opposed to large-breasted men.
So I had a friend who said to me, hey, have you seen these anti-Semitic and otherwise posts on Bob Bledsaw Jr.'s and Bob Bledsaw III's Facebook pages? And I was like, huh? And then, like a lot of us, we took a look. And now, why don't you roll it?
Right.
These are some of the examples of regrettable posts by Bob Jr.
And by the way, so there's a better than even chance that Bob's watching this right now. I'll just let you know, because he's that's better than 50% chance. We're not calling Bob anything. We're just going to post what he posted. We're not going to say anything about it. People can draw their own conclusions by what was posted there.
You know, I think there's a lot here to unpack. There's a lot here that that simply is unacceptable in everyday society. There's the black hole of weird conspiracy theories. There's the black hole of German imagery, World War II Nazi imagery, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so these are just some examples of posts that Robert Bledsaw III made, but there's also some comments from number 2. But you know, Kung Fuhrer versus, it's all just regrettable. It's all just regrettable.
It's really cringy. It's very cringy. And it's one of those things where if it was a friend of yours, you'd call them up, which, by the way, people did.
Yeah.
Said, you know, just, you might want to take this down. It's just not good. It's just not good to have this stuff out.
Yeah.
And that's what you do. If a friend posted something that is regrettable, you call them and you say, hey, you need to take that down. It's the same thing about, you know, they always say when you're going to post something in anger, close your computer down, wait overnight, then wake up the next morning and see if it still wants to post.
That's right. So write the draft, but don't send it. Why don't we take this down?
I am trying.
So very quickly, the internet microscope turns to Bob Bledsaw II and Bob Bledsaw III's Facebook pages and postings. There are some behind the scenes stuff that we are not entitled to speak to, and so on and so forth. But very quickly, there's a number of things that happen. Number one is that Frog God essentially, I mean, Mike, you can speak to this, but Frog God essentially says, and Teagle will ship and we're done. And Goodman Games.
We lost money on the product.
And then Goodman Games. Yeah. 1 second. So Goodman Games had been selling products. I think I'll be right back. They've been selling Judges Guild products. I'll be right back.
Yeah, we can jump in. So by the way, somebody said here, this is Bob 2 and 3. Yes. Bob Sr. has passed away. Bob Sr. Is no longer with us, unfortunately. He actually died very close to, was it Gary or Dave? He died really close to when either Gary or Dave died. So, but yeah, Bob Sr. is not a part of this. This is Bob Jr. and Bob III.
Yeah.
So I don't know where Jim. I was trying to think where Jim was going on that, but because of these questionable posts that Bob would posted, people were kind of moving away from it a little bit. Well, that was unfortunate for Joe Goodman of Goodman Games, because they had already decided they were going to publish one of their big, giant, gorgeous anniversary edition books, and it was going to be all about Janelle Jaquays and her contributions to the hobby, which included everything she wrote for Judges Guild, which was Caverns of Thracia, Dark Tower, Book of Treasure Maps, Dungeoneer, Night of the Walking Wets, an adventure that was in Dungeoneer magazine. And this put Joe and Janelle in a pickle, a bit of a pickle. So Eric, they posted a video.
Yep.
Joe and Janelle posted and you can still find it online. Matter of fact, I'm looking at it right here because
it
was posted, and it was kind of a look. You know, we don't
Joe does a good job of calling out what had been shared as absolutely reprehensible. And even though you guys probably said this while I was out, understand that everybody who knows Bob Bledsaw Sr., everybody who worked with him, including Janelle, has said that he didn't have this belief system that was evidenced in the posts of Bob Bledsaw Jr. and Bob Bledsaw III. Janelle worked with him up through I believe the time he died. There's no question that they came out swinging in the video and called out the behavior and what they had seen in the posts and so on. You can go watch it. It's easily visible. We could even put the link up at some point, but it's out there and you can see it. And the day after they made that video, they also did a statement on their website where they talked about, we're dropping Judges Guild. We're not going forward with Judges Guild.
Because by the way, up until then, they had done some reprints of Judges Guild products. They did Thieves of Madagascar. Yes. They did the Fire Mage. I'm
what did the big coffee table book? Right.
They did the coffee table books, but they also did modules, and I believe Michael Curtis did some additional stuff in the back of it. So they had reprinted several Judges Guild items. I assume under license because, like I said, it was Thieves of Fortress Madagascar. What was the one? The Fire? I can't remember. Fire Mages. That's what I want to call it. But also some of Janelle's stuff. They'd reprinted Caverns of Thracia, Dark Tower in like a soft cover form. So they had done several reprints of Judges Guild material, including the gigantic coffee table books. One contains all the so at one point Judges Guild had 3 magazines they were publishing. It'd be like if TSR had the Dragon and Dungeon and then another one. That's kind of how they had the Dungeoneer, Judges Guild Journal, and Pegasus. Yeah, I believe the first coffee table book was all the Judges Guild journals and Dungeoneers. Or am I wrong?
No,
I don't think it included the Pegasus.
And the coffee table book was amazing.
It's beautiful.
Let's be clear, it was spectacular.
Absolutely
both of the Judges Guild books, from everything that came out of Goodman for Judges Guild has been.
There was a lot of respect for the Judges Guild name and for the fans who love Judges Guild. They were excellent. Citadel Fire. Thank you, Rob.
So
they're beautiful, and the one that came out, the Janelle one, was gorgeous too, and it's just. That it was really a labor of love. Let's put it that way.
So let's talk about a couple other things around the Kickstarter. Number one is they have not made an update to the Kickstarter to the City State of the Invincible Overlord Kickstarter. There has not been an update in 5 years. I think it's 5 years and 1 month at this point.
Well, it's going to be 5 years next week.
5 years next week. Sorry, 5 years next week. But they have made no comments. As the creators, they have made 0 comments about this. And if you go to the project on Kickstarter and you look at the comments, there are no replies from Bob Bledsaw II or Bob Bledsaw III. There's no comments from anybody that was associated with it. And the backers are, in the greatest understatement I may make on this show, displeased. And they are not happy. And so, again, this has puttered along with nothing from Judges Guild, nobody talking about any of this, et cetera, et cetera.
And most of the people, I would say the majority of people that backed the first City State had written their money off at this point. Usually if you go this long without hearing anything, you can pretty much, Kickstarter says in their rules, you're like, this is just an investment platform. You may or may not get your product. And so right. I think people at that point have written it off like, okay, it's just not going to happen. It's been too long. There's just too much work involved. It's gone. So it was kind of the white whale of Judges Guild. Everybody said, boy, it would have sure been cool if City State had come out. Man, that would have been a really cool, reprint.
And after all of their Facebook posts were essentially outed, both Bob Jr. and Bob III scrubbed their Facebook pages. They deleted everything, mass deletes. They unfriended or blocked people, et cetera, et cetera. Then a couple of years ago, one of the things that came up was through comments on their Judges Guild Facebook page, from comments here and there was a path that if you decided you didn't want to be a part of the City State of the Invincible Overlord Kickstarter anymore, you could request a refund. You had to send an email in and ask for your refund. You had to provide proof, like screen captures from Kickstarter, from the Kickstarter app or whatnot, that you were a backer, but that you would be receiving your funds back at some point.
And
so,
although it did state as funds become available. Yeah, if they had
they put people in order, and as they raised money, they would send out. So let me tell my little side tale here briefly. So in 2022, I had seen this note. I had seen all the shenanigans around their Facebook pages and truly some reprehensible things on their Facebook pages. And I made a request. Now, Eric has seen screen captures of all of this.
Mm-hmm.
I made a request. The next day after I sent the email, I got a reply from Bob Bledsaw Jr., who said, I've got you on the list. As soon as funds free up, I will send you a refund, and you're tapped out. You're essentially out of the Kickstarter. And then that was April. I believe it was April. And then in August of that year, just a few months later, I got a check in the mail. I got a check with not only what I had put into the Kickstarter, but I also got some interest on top of it, which I deposited. I was like, holy smokes. And it is clear that this process is ongoing, that if you send a note in and you get on the list and you prove that you were a backer, they're going to get to you eventually and they're going to fund you.
But so, I got a question for you. Is this shared anywhere on the Kickstarter?
So that's a point of contention. Number one is that they have said this in comments on other places and so on. And let me speak to that. I talked to a former practicing attorney today who said, what you have to do is you have to go back to 11 years ago. And what were the Kickstarter terms that a creator operated under 11 years ago? Because here's the thing. By not stating on the Kickstarter that they are offering refunds, there's no official proof that they're offering refunds, or there's certainly no declaration that they're offering refunds. And they're sort of sidestepping this as an issue. They've made it very clear. I mean, they were commenting on Eric's post this week. Somebody associated with Judges Guild was saying, well, if you send your name in and so on and so forth, we'll put you on the list. You'll get a refund. But it's very clear that 930 odd backers haven't gotten their refunds yet. And so how do I know that number? Strangely enough, last year, out of the blue, I got a second refund. Now, I had been sort of keeping this private, but out of nowhere, I had money show up in my PayPal account from Judges Guild. And with it was the notation that I was refund number 34, and I essentially got my money twice. Okay. About a month later, Bob Bledsaw reached out to me. Bob Bledsaw Jr. reached out to me, and we had a conversation where he was very nebulous. I essentially, was asking him the pointed questions, and he said, you got a refund. It's none of your business anymore. And I said, if this conversation sort of continues this way, I'm just going to turn around and take the money from the second refund you sent me and send it to the Jewish Anti-Defamation League. Because I sort of, by the end of our conversation, I was ready to pick a fight.
I would say legally, Jim, the fact he sent you the money without you saying anything means the money was yours anyway. So,
which came up this week because one of Bob Jr.'s other sons claimed that I had requested a second refund through PayPal, which is incorrect. I have never asked for a second refund.
Which, by the way, you can easily check too, right? I mean, that's
Eric was on I included Eric in the conversation with my screen capture showing the entire email chain and so on and so forth. And for my trouble, the person we were talking with left the conversation. So I sent that person another message, and I said, here's the deal. I'm going to just send you the money back, which I will. I said, but really and truly what I'd like to see you do is I'd actually like to see you log into the Kickstarter account and put an update up that says we're offering refunds, send us an email, give us some proof, and we'll put you on the list. And essentially I was told I was strong arming them for wanting them to do that. But long story short, somebody said, why on God's green earth are we talking about it this week? So
bring them up to date, Jim.
On Saturday, Goodman Games held an event at its Indiana warehouse called Dungeon Con. And Dungeon Con was a great gathering of the DCC faithful. If anybody had a car and could get to Dungeon Con, this gave you a chance to find treasures that had come from the warehouse consolidations that Goodman did. But they also announced some new products. And one of the things that they announced is that they are doing, if you've followed along with Goodman, they've done their old school adventures, which have been insanely successful. They began by reproducing old TSR material, but it also moved on to include Dark Tower from Judges Guild, et cetera, et cetera. They've made a great effort to publish these in both DCC, Dungeon Crawl Classics versions, as well as versions for 5th edition. And they've been huge. They've been tremendously successful.
And they're very beautiful and very well made. They did a great job. That's why I bought the Dark Tower. There wasn't anything there that I really needed because I don't play modern versions, but it's just such a gosh awful, beautiful version of Dark Tower. I had to buy it.
And so they announced the City State of the Invincible Overlord as Old School Adventures number 10. There is now actually a page on Backerkit where you can sign up to be notified on the launch of the new version. They've released a video with Joe Goodman, Michael Curtis, and I can't think of the third person, but certainly they're all starting to talk about it. But once the announcement sort of hit a couple of the Facebook groups, there was questions from people who had backed the original City State of the Invincible Overlord Kickstarter from Judges Guild. I gotta say this right off the bat. Let me throw something out, which is number one. There are 900 and something people who have not received refunds from Judges Guild. If that number is lower than 900, I'm approximating. But the majority of the people who backed the City State of the Invincible Overlord on Kickstarter have not received refunds from Judges Guild.
And have no idea there was a method to receive
and have never been notified officially that they can get a refund. But there are, of those people that are out there, there are a lot of hurt feelings over this. And there were questions about, well, what? And so I want to unequivocally state something, right? We have a hobby with a lot of entitlement. We have a lot of people who feel like I should be able to push this domino and set the chain off, or I should push this domino and set the chain off. If you are an original backer of the City State of the Invincible Overlord, Goodman Games doesn't owe you anything. They do not owe you anything. Your grief, your beef, your frustration, your anger, all should be solely directed at Judges Guild and the principles behind the failed Kickstarter. I'm sorry, behind the Kickstarter that has yet to fulfill. Goodman Games also at Dungeon Con had for sale a copy of, and I'm sorry, Eric, I forgot to send this to you, but let me send this to you in our chat. Mm-hmm. There were, and I'm going to apologize. I lifted these photos from a post that somebody made earlier today.
Oh yeah, I know the photo.
But let me show these. So they also released a version of the DCC rulebook that featured the City State of the Invincible Overlord artwork for the cover. And so there, I've sent you the two pictures.
Okay.
And so why don't you, when you get those and you can bring those up, let's bring those up. But they released them. Now, what's fascinating about this is that these are the 10th printing of the DCC rulebook. These are not 13th printing. These aren't the most current printing. And in fact, I think, as I understand it, the 10th printing had a couple of foibles and missteps today. Or, I think there were problems with that. Mm-hmm. But it certainly appears that these have been sitting in a warehouse waiting for an opportunity to finally come out and be sold. And so I the pictures I've sent to Eric that he's going to bring up are pictures of, excuse me, it's allergy season here. Are pictures of the front of the rule book. Looks amazing and cool. The spine looks amazing and cool. Yes, there we go. So there's the cover with the glorious map that if you're old enough, you can remember that. And then if you'll flip over to the other picture, Eric, the other picture is the one that when you look at it, at the very bottom, it actually over the barcode says 10th printing, and then the copyright is 2023. So these are at least 2 years old, possibly older. But this was another one of those things that you're like, wow, okay, so these have been sort of sitting around for a while. So there's a lot of people that have questions. There are questions about the statement that Joe Goodman and Goodman Games made back in 5 years ago, where, we're not going to work with Judges Guild going forward, and so on and so forth. Is this version of the City State of the Invincible Overlord something that at the time that they acquired, and I believe Mike or Eric, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that they've said that they actually now own all of the rights to reprint all of Janelle's works in perpetuity. I believe they actually own those.
I believe Janelle's stuff that I thought the announcement back when it happened was that Janelle's stuff was purchased by Goodman Games for, so it was that the ownership was transferred. That was my impression.
Sure.
The announcement.
So there's a lot of arrows flying back and forth, and I'm gonna try to tap dance through a minefield here.
Well, we need to. So we'll unpack them one at a time because there's a lot of different directions here. So go ahead, Jim. There's a lot of different.
Sure. So let's start with the first, which is you said you weren't ever going to work with Judges Guild again, and now you're doing something with Judges Guild. And okay, I think anybody with any sense of how to operate a search engine on the internet can find all the relevant stories and screen captures from 5 years ago and see exactly what it is that people got upset by. And if you aren't willing to look at that, and you aren't, or you do look at it and you're not upset, that's in your chair. That's not in mine. We have plenty of people out there that are looking for something to go from 0 to 100 and lose their minds over. You got to live by your own standards, right? I think the phrase that I heard today that I really, really liked was keep your powder dry for the things that matter. And I think a lot of us who saw this stuff 5 years ago were like, whoa, holy smokes. Like this is not something you say in polite company, rude company. Like this is beyond the pale kind of stuff. And so I think you said you weren't going to work with Judges Guild anymore. You released a statement. I think
there's two ways this gets published. Either they bought the material, or they're licensing it. There's no third ground, right? I mean, that's it.
Well, or they licensed it, or they had the deal done before everything blew up in 2020, in February of 2020. But
still, at one point, you had to license it and or purchase. Yes,
that's right. And it very well may be that they've just been sitting on this and waiting, which is fine. It doesn't matter. But the people who are upset about the Bledsaws, and there's a notion about cancel culture, and I do not believe that's anything that comes close to this.
No.
I think anybody who's throwing the phrase cancel culture or social justice warriors, I've seen that a couple of times in the last couple of days, and that is unacceptable.
No one said, look, this goes along with the entire thing that no one is impinging on your free speech. You are free to say whatever you want. You're not free from the consequences of that.
That's right. And there's nobody here among the three of us that believes that there's nobody among the three of us that believes that they don't have the right to post these horrible things on their Facebook wall. They can, but you don't get to escape the consequences. And so there's that angle on this. Then you've got people who are then you've got I'll say the prior Kickstarter backers who are upset to see something coming out that they were promised but never got delivered. And as I said earlier, you got to take that up with the Bledsaws. You got to take that up with Judges Guild. And and
we don't. Okay, so this cancel culture stuff's bullshit. So here's the deal.
yes,
we don't have the power to cancel anything.
Right.
And this is all comes down. It's going to come down to the marketplace. If people want this and they want to buy it, they're going to buy it. We have no power to do anything to cancel anything. It's not within our purview. It's not within our power to do so. So the cancel culture bullshit that's just ridiculous.
right.
Don't even throw that out there. It's just dumb. Okay.
So I think there is a little bit of shock by people who saw this announcement. These are the people who backed the Kickstarter, the Kickstarter 11 years ago. The people who backed the Kickstarter 11 years ago are seeing something coming out that, frankly, is what they would have liked to have received from Judges Guild, and they haven't. And they haven't even had they haven't even had a reply from the creators of the project in 5 years. So they're upset about things. This is causing some acrimony within the Dungeon Crawl Classics community, because you have people who have seen the Bloodsaw's postings and are frankly appalled. And I think appalled is the right word. I think Joe Goodman was appalled. He used a number of adjectives that are similar to that in the video that he made with Janelle. I agree with that wholeheartedly. I agree with that 100%. But Kickstarter backers for City State of the Invincible Overlord are owed nothing by Goodman Games. They aren't owed anything by Goodman Games. If anything, if your love of Judges Guild and the City State of the Invincible Overlord is what drove you to fund the prior Kickstarter, this is the Kickstarter that might, Kickstarter Backerkit, whatever they use. This might be the thing that actually delivers to you what you had hoped you were going to get 11 years ago when you backed the other. I did have a conversation with somebody today where we were talking about, this is going to force people. This is going to force people that it's going to force people to put their morals aside and hold their nose and back this project and so on and so forth. And I know someone who's taken a very, very firm stand on this, which is, I don't support a company that funds, that financially passes money to people with horrific anti-Semitic views. And they've towed this line for quite a while. And I had a different conversation, and I have had a lot of conversations over the last 3 days about this stuff. And somebody today made a great point to me. While we were on the phone, he said, "What kind of phone do you have?" And I said, "Well, I have and he goes, "Well, I think," he goes, "I want you to think about this." He says, "I want you to think about that phone." He says, "I want you to think about that phone." He said, "I want you to think about who assembled that phone in China, who mined the minerals, right? Like, there's not a lot of technology, there's not a lot of sourcing on these phones that people want deep looks at. There are some great examples of people who have smuggled cameras and so on into the Foxconn assembly, the assembly factory. And if you're a big supporter of how those phones got put together, we turn blind eyes to things. The point that someone made to me this afternoon, and I agree. I think it's a fair point that there's a lot of things about our day-to-day lives and things that we touch every day where we're not necessarily willing to look beyond a certain comfort level. And I thought the phone analogy sort of hit me hard today, right? Because I don't like the idea of child slave labor, or let's call them 18 or older, who are essentially working feverishly to assemble iPhones for a Western democracy that we offshored all of this to China. And if you haven't seen pictures of what the Foxconn assembly labs are like, it's nightmarish, right? It makes the British model of indentured servitude look like a walk in the park. And so if this project comes up, and you loved City State of the Invincible Overlord, and you desperately wanted to have a modern version, this is what you're going to probably get long before you get the long awaited decade plus now City State of the Invincible Overlord from Judges Guild, because I frankly, I don't think that's ever going to fulfill. I voted with my wallet, which was, I'd like my money back, please, because I just don't think it's ever going to fill. I think Joe Goodman is a decent guy. I think Joe Goodman has his heart in the right place. And I think he said a number of the things when this blew up 5 years ago that frankly, any normal, decent human being would say. When you see the repugnant things that were put on both Bob Bledsaw Jr.'s wall and the Third's wall, this is stuff that is just horrific. And if we can't recognize that for being horrific, if we can't, I've spoken before. I had a neighbor growing up who was an FBI agent, and during World War II, he served in Europe under Patton. And at one point, I'm going to make this story really, really short. At one point, every kid in our neighborhood got to talk with Bob, and Bob talked about the day that a couple of trucks showed up, and they loaded his platoon and another platoon into the trucks, and they drove for a few hours, and they didn't know where they were going. And when they would get to crossroads, they would see trucks that were coming from where they were headed, and they would say, "Where are we going?" And nobody would say a word to them. And of course, what happened was they were being taken to one of the camps, and they got to walk around for like a half an hour or an hour and see what the concentration camps were about. And then they got loaded into the trucks and they got sent back to where they had been. And this was under Eisenhower's order. Eisenhower wanted every single U.S. troop that could be taken to one of the camps and shown the face of evil to be shown that. And when you see somebody make Facebook posts on their wall that mock this, that hashtag Holocaust denial or something similar, or Holocaust hoax, that was it. If you look at one of the screen captures that Eric showed earlier, it's Holocaust hoax. There's a difference between cancel culture and this stuff. I'm sorry. Like, we got to draw some lines. And if you want to support that, if you want to support Holocaust hoax or whatever, that's fine, but don't come near my table. I don't need you at my table. I don't need you in my immediate circle of friends. And frankly, we have to draw lines. Yes, the Bledsaws have every right to believe or say whatever they want. Nobody is going to come to their house, drag them into the streets, and put them into FEMA re-education camps. But they are not immune to the consequences of those words or their actions or those posts. And that played out 5 years ago. That's the past.
Right.
I think we can say, it would be great if we had a little more of an idea. Like, are we backing this Kickstarter and then there are monies that are going to go to the Bledsaws? Because if there are, and we don't know, nobody knows, but if there are monies going to the Bledsaws, let's be clear. If you backed the original City State of the Invincible Overlord Kickstarter, you don't have a beef with Joe Goodman. You have a beef with the folks who created the project, and you need to reach out to them. You need to tell them you want a refund. You need to get in line so that if they do start getting monies from this upcoming crowdfunding project, you have a shot of getting your money back. And that's what I think, Eric, Mike, I think that's what we would like more than anything else, right? We'd love to see those people be made whole.
Well, so I'm going to unpack a few things here. We're going to unpack some stuff. So we have stated that, look, if you have an issue with this, your issue is with Judges Guild and the guys running it. However, I think, and look, Joe doesn't owe me anything. He doesn't owe us an explanation. He doesn't owe us any thought of where the money's going to. He doesn't owe us. We don't have to know if he paid, the Bledsaws a lump sum, or we don't have to know any of that. I'm going to say right now, though, it's bad form not to get ahead of it. I think it's bad. He's taking bad advice if he just thinks he's just going to run by this and not really talk about it, and hopefully in 2 months everybody forget about it. I think that's not the smart thing to do. And I could be wrong. Maybe he's got advisors telling him, no, just don't say anything, don't do anything. I think it's not reprehensible. It's just, it's disappointing. It's disappointing that he hasn't got ahead of it and said, look, here's the deal. We know that almost 1,000 of you backed the original project. You didn't get anything. You might possibly get a refund, but we don't know. There's nothing we can do to make you whole. There's nothing we can do.
No.
Or if you provide a Kickstarter number, maybe we'll give you a PDF down the line, which he doesn't have to do, by the way. He doesn't have to do anything. Or just a timeline. Like, look, here's what we did. We said we weren't going to give them any more money, and we haven't. This was licensed way back when we did whatever. We've had the licensing ever since then. We didn't give them any additional money. I guess I'm just upset by the total lack of any kind of openness here. And and like I said, and once again, I'm going to say he doesn't owe us anything. But in a lot of cases in real life, people don't owe you an explanation. But if they're polite and if they're a good person, they'll give you one. I don't owe you an explanation, but I'm going to tell you this. Here's what here's why I did that, and I'm just going to let you know. And I think that leaves a bad taste in a lot of people's mouths. And look, if you look at the original 960 people that backed it, I can see where a lot of them, who basically that's your core audience of people that love Judges Guild, I can see where a lot of them have a bad taste in their mouth and don't want anything to do with this. And I agree with them absolutely 100%. I'm not going to back this. I have no desire to put any money towards this at all. I mean, I don't
have how many copies of the original, Mike?
Well, that's true too. But I'm just saying I don't see.
We all have copies.
We all do. Yes.
I just don't. I don't have immediate need for it, but I just don't. It's just too murky. The waters are too murky here. I don't want to swim in these waters.
But Mike, see, I don't even think it's necessarily the waters are too murky. It's that the waters, which were a little unclear in the first place, are now getting murkified on social media. Okay,
and people are just getting things wrong.
Yeah,
right? That's the other thing is that you have people. So Ty raises a question. Yes, at one point Goodman had made a post that said profits were making donations to charity, which I believe absolutely that they did. I saw something. Eric and I were talking before the show. Somebody posted a link and said Goodman Games took down all their statements, blah blah blah, which is horseshit. They did not. Those posts, particularly the if you go on Goodman Games website and you type in Judges Guild in the search, the fifth entry that comes up is literally their statement about how they're not going to do business with Judges Guild going forward. And the day before that is the post with the video of Janelle and Joe sitting down and addressing all the controversy from the con in San Francisco 5 years ago. So people are throwing absolute horseshit around that has no grounding in reality. I think we're trying to do a really good job tonight of just trying to walk people through a timeline, because one of the things that's come up is, well, what did they say that could be that bad? What happened 5 years ago? Does it really matter? And that's fine, right? I get that there's people who weren't around 5 years ago, who weren't around 11 years ago when the Kickstarter came out, right? We have had a tremendous growth in the hobby over the last 10 years, and that's great, right? But you should also have a long memory on some things, and this is one of them.
Well, like I said, it all comes down to the fact of transparency. And look, and Joe's a guy that's done the right thing for a long time now. He did right by Janelle. And full disclosure, I was a very good friend of Janelle. Janelle was one of my heroes growing up. I was so pleased to finally meet Janelle. I talked to Janelle probably once a week for the last few years until she got sick. And he did right by her. He did right by the Judges Guild name. But I'd love the waters unmurkified, like Eric said. And I just, look, am I owed that? No, I'm not owed that. I'm not owed anything. But I just think it's common courtesy. And people are asking the question. And look, it's not outside the bounds of human decency to ask that question. And some of the people I saw, Eric's video, some of the idiotic responses I saw were they were idiotic. Like people that are saying, well, you're just mad because you didn't get your money back. That's bullshit. Eric doesn't care. I know Eric. He has never said, oh my God, I haven't got my money back from Judges Guild. No, that's not why he's talking about that. So that's stupid. That's just stupid.
And let's be clear. What Mike's talking about is again, I'm going to talk to gamer entitlement, right? This sense that we are, and Mike, I'm sorry, I'm not calling you out as entitled. I do think we feel, hey, can we have some more information? Could we please have some more information? And that is an entitlement factor. There are people who understand that. I have had numerous dealings with Joe Goodman over the last 15 years. I think the world of Joe Goodman. He's been an unbelievably decent guy, and really and truly, I think he has stepped up when occasion has called upon him. He has not only stepped up, he's done tremendous things. When Aaron Coleman was passing away, he was very kind to let us use his live stream for a charity auction to raise money for Aaron's son's education fund, and I will owe Joe forever for that. Joe has been unbelievably decent to the community.
In full disclosure, I've had business dealings with Joe. Years ago, when he first started DCC, he was really getting into Appendix N. Appendix N was what he based DCC on. He read every book in Appendix N, and DCC came out of that. So I had a deal with Joe where if I found Appendix N books, I would send them to Joe, and if you ever went to the Gen Con convention and saw the giant book racks that he had there, I was one of many people that would send Joe a box of books 2-3 times a year, and we decide on a fee, how much he paid per book. Some of the older books he paid more for, but it was fun for me. It was a treasure hunt for me. It was a treasure hunt. Right. I knew the books were going to a good cause. I needed the extra cash. It was great. Joe was 100. I mean, he kept his word 100%. What I would send him, 87 books, and he'd send me whatever. He'd send me, the next day the PayPal will be in the mail. So I don't have any problem. Like Jim just said. But I also want to say the thing about entitlement is I'm entitled to ask. Now, Joe doesn't have to answer me, but I'm always entitled. You're always entitled to ask somebody something. Well, you don't have to expect an answer.
Well, Mike, here's the thing. The person that really owes us an explanation is the one that's been silent for 5 long effing years.
But I don't. Okay, so I guess it boils down to the fact is I don't expect anything out of them.
Real quick, let's talk to that too. So Mike was not part of it, but Eric has feverishly tried to get the person who is associated with Judges Guild, who has been commenting everywhere about how you can get refunds, except the one place that they should, which is Kickstarter. But we asked to try to get Bob Bledsaw Jr. on the show. Mm-hmm. I think if that happens, you'll probably have to see me not be here that night because I don't think he likes me very much.
Honestly, Jim, let's put the cards on. I'm going to put my cards on the table. I don't think he likes anybody that's currently on the screen.
No,
he doesn't.
He doesn't like.
So I think one. I want to, we're at an hour, so let me wrap this up real quick. Again, if you are somebody that backed the City State of the Invincible Overlord Kickstarter from Judges Guild, they are claiming they will send you a refund, and they have sent refunds. I'm proof. Well, they sent it to me twice. That you need to email them. Supposedly, contact information is on the Facebook
actually,
page.
It's not even email. You're supposed to, as explained to me, I should know this. You got to go to the Judges Guild website. Apparently, I had to figure this out. Go to the Contact Us page and then give them your backer number and all your information. And apparently, that's how you do it. Just saying.
So if you backed it, go do that. And so then let's talk about the new one. They announced it Saturday, and today is Wednesday. We got plenty of time before this thing launches that Joe could watch this. Joe could look at every other corner of the internet, and believe me, there's a lot of bullshit. Joe can decide what he wants to say out loud, or Goodman Games can decide what they want to tell people about all of this. Yes, in 2020, they made a post and said they weren't doing any business with Judges Guild anymore. But frankly, I'm one of the people who thinks there's I think there's a good chance that the rights for all of this were agreed upon, negotiated, and so on before they ever even made that statement, that they've just really been trying to like sit on this until enough time had passed that they could just do this because they paid for it. And they're in a business to be a good business, a successful business. So I think that wraps it up. Am I missing anything?
I've got a few more points.
Go for it.
So I wanted to also say that as some people were saying here, well, this is, how did they know this was going to happen? And Thrax said, how dare they not have everything answered about a project that was announced Sunday, a month and a half away from launch? Because they've known this was going to be a lightning rod for 2 years. That they had to have known. There's no way they didn't know that this was just going to jump into the blogosphere and people were just going to nod and smile at it and just move on. They had to know it. And I hope their strategy for dealing with it wasn't just don't say anything, don't react, don't give any explanations. We're just going to monkeys, know that. I don't want that to be their. I respect Joe, and I would love to hear Joe say something. If he doesn't, he doesn't have to. He doesn't have to reply to me. I will lose a little respect for him, but that Joe probably doesn't care. But I'm just saying, it's not just me. There's a lot of people out there that are going to lose respect for Joe if he decides to have zero explanation or background on this. It's not just me. And look, maybe he doesn't care. Like I'm sure DCC is doing great, and they're an incredible company. But I feel bad. I would feel bad if this was just thrown out there and hoping that everybody's just going to look past it and not worry about it. And it happened years ago, and we're just not going to reply to it. I really think that it would behoove them to take a weekend or a week to talk among all the good people that work there. Michael Curtis is one of them. And talk to everybody.
I love everybody associated with Goodman Games. I have yet to meet somebody where I'm like, they're all wonderful, decent people. And
Harley Stroh is awesome. Harley Stroh is
Goodman has built a community. Goodman Games has built a community that is second to none for decency, and that's what's killing me is that I'm watching people within this community throw rocks at each other, and one of the things that I'm really seeing is that some of the people who are, I'll say on the pro side of the Kickstarter and so on and so forth. I saw a couple of comments that made me really go, okay, it's one thing to say, I want to see City State and I want to see an old school adventures version of City State and so on and so forth versus, I have not seen it, but I've seen a couple of things that brush against the side of what did Bob or Bob Jr. or Bob the Third really do? Okay, that's what tonight's episode of Talking Crit is really about. We want to make sure you got a pretty informed opinion.
Right.
And you can go follow any of the number of links that Eric will put in this video. And you need to educate yourself because this is not stuff that is, is it really?
Once again, look, people, I saw a lot of really lame ass responses to Eric on his video. And a lot of the people were the same. It was kind of the same thing that, well, you're not entitled to anything. And Eric knows he's not entitled to anything. I mean, it's the same way that, whenever you talk to anybody, you're not entitled to any kind of answer, so, but it doesn't hurt to ask the question. You can always ask. they can choose not to reply. And like I said, I would. There's some things I'd like to know about this, about what's coming out and how this.
I just hope to God there's an add-on where you can get giant, new, unbelievable, high-resolution maps, so that I can fill my entire front yard with all of the maps.
Oh, we'll talk to Rob Conley about
it.
that.
It would be great. Well, that'd be great, except I'm not going to spend a cent on this, but that's not going to help me.
But
So
again, Mike, Mike, you are not the audience. Okay.
No, well, I should be. Why am I not the audience? So I'm an old school gamer that loves Judges Guild.
You have a copy slabbed? You probably do. You probably have enough that you've got one slabbed.
No, I don't have a slab. I don't have a slab, but I'm just saying is that I would love to have a working copy that I could pull out and fiddle with without losing $100 because I tore a page or got a chocolate smear on it. But no, I'm look. Maybe we're not maybe it's just like WotC. We're no longer the target audience, right?
I
So maybe that's it. But I still would love to have a great copy. But there's just too much baggage here. There's way too much baggage here, and until I am satisfied with what I hear, I don't want anything to do with it. Look, there's probably a lot of people like that. In the last week, I've talked to a lot of people who backed the original Kickstarter. They have no intention of having anything to do with this. And I even told them, I said, look, you can supposedly get your money back. And a lot of them have just written it off so long ago, they're just really not worried about it any longer.
But here, and again, listen, here, and just to take all this into the only time I've ever seen Joe Goodman make a bad business decision was with 4E signing the game system license and starting Level Up magazine, which, yes, I have, I think, the 2 copies that actually came out. That's the only, and that made him say, holy crap, I got to take control of my own business. Can't be relying on some other company. Let me write DCC RPG. Let's get this out there. Let's form a community.
Which was smart because, yeah.
It's very smart. And it was ahead of the curve for what other people have done with like Shadow Dark and OSC. He was ahead of the curve. I'd like to think that Joe is getting ready, if he isn't already ready, to address this. And I'm willing to give him the space to do so.
I think better than that. It's not the space to do so. I think I think everybody who has been since Saturday, I think everybody needs to give Joe Goodman and the people at Goodman Games the benefit of the doubt until they show us something different. And if you are angry and outraged, again, we stress that you should go to the Judges Guild website and you should use the contact us and you should request your refund for the City State of the Invincible Overlord if you backed it. And let's also too, Rob Conley is watching tonight. He's in the chat. Let's give Rob a big shout out because number one, Rob, there's a lot of times where people will look past their personal beliefs for the purpose of business or keeping their job and whatever. And Rob, hats off to you. Like, Rob didn't compromise his ethics in any way, shape, or form. Took one look at what he had seen and said, well, fuck no. And those might not be Rob's words, but Rob was pretty clear that I'm not doing this and I'm out and see ya. And I think Rob does not get enough credit because Rob is the person that really brought this out in a way that and let's not forget, let's go down to Ty's comment. Let's go down to Ty Beard's comment where he says about arbitrating there we go. I won an arbitration against Bledsaw over his posts. And we're talking about the post that we were previewing earlier. A business dispute, not a free speech dispute, a business dispute. And Ty sums it up. They were vile. And so Rob and Ty and everybody who has seen this stuff and recognizes it for the filth that it is, if you have the grounding of decency to understand how bad and awful all of that was, then let's all just take a breath. Let's take a step back. Let's give Goodman Games the benefit of the doubt. I have no idea when the project's going to launch, but they got plenty of time between now and when it launches to address. And I'll say
Yeah, I got you, Jim. But the thing is, this has been in the works for a while. Did they not know this is going to be a bit of a firestorm?
Well,
I
but
don't
Mike, I think
understand
they
that.
did. But the fact of the matter is that the first way they did it, the first thing is they showed it off to all of the people who are.
Now, I get that. I get
Right?
that.
And that's
Yeah,
your
it was
soft
informal.
launch. That's your soft
Informal
launch.
setting. Yeah, it was informal
This
setting.
has started to trickle, but come on, right? Eric and I literally saw somebody going on and on and on about how Goodman had taken down all their posts about Judges Guild. Bullshit. It's absolute, thank you, Colonel Potter, horse hockey. Those posts are still on the Goodman Games website. And there are enough people saying things that I am positive that in a few weeks, in the next few weeks,
right.
We will see. No, they still own it.
I'm going to address this real quickly. One of the Bledsoes we've been communicating with on Facebook said that this was licensed by Judges Guild to Goodman Games. So, assuming a person knows what they're talking about, that is your answer.
Yes. So, anyway,
No,
well, we got other stuff. We still have.
I'm going to say that in a few weeks, we're going to come. If we don't hear anything, we're going to come back to this. Sorry,
I don't think
we're going to come back to this because I like I said, I can ask. I don't have to be answered, but I can ask as much as I want. And I'll keep asking until I get an explanation. And Joe's free to give me the middle finger and say you don't deserve an explanation.
I don't think he would.
I'm going to keep asking.
I don't think
we may have to revisit this in a few weeks. We'll see.
But based on just comments based on things I've seen in the last 36 hours, right? Just in the last 36 hours. No, I'll take it back. Just in the last 24
hours have been
in the last 24 hours. This has picked up enough speed that frankly, I think we'll be hearing something sooner than later.
Well, I hope so. I think that would be
right now. This is one of if this was a fire, this would be like a 3-alarm fire at this point, with everybody responding except maybe like other localities, because it just went like a tinderbox, and both sides are throwing shit at each other emotionally, and that's let me just take a step with that. There are emotions in play. When you take your emotions out of the play, it becomes a much easier situation to look at and evaluate. But there are emotions running on both sides, some defending Goodman, some getting mad at Goodman for working with Judges Guild, and there are emotional arguments. They aren't arguments often based on anything but the most basic facts, but the emotions are getting in the way. So we're gonna step away from the emotions right now.
Yeah, I agree. So what else has happened this week?
Well, I don't. Can we call it another WotC fuck up? Can we call it that?
Another.
I mean,
Mike is it's like King Osric and Conan. Mike is sitting on his throne, and somebody has just run into the throne room and said, my liege, the Duke of WotC has done something again. And all Mike can do is go, really?
Again?
Seriously?
Will someone not rid me of this troublesome Duke of WotC?
Of this troublesome, yes. Oh, God. Here we go. Well,
all right, Eric,
let's dive into this as well.
Give us
okay. So, and by the way, the topic we're going to talk about has been changed yet again, because, again, huge thank you to Joe Block, the Greyhawk Grognard, who reached out to me yesterday and said, hey, I just did a video. Did I get a scoop? I go, what are you talking about? He goes, have you looked at the licensing scheme for the DMs Guild? And I'm like, why would I look at the licensing scheme for the DMs Guild? Because I publish very little. I certainly don't worry about the DMs Guild. Well, the DMs Guild, here, let me pull up one of these screenshots, because this will make it a little bit extra, I don't know, crunchy, special. Where we oh, this is in
crunchy and special.
Crunchy and special and crunchy. All right, I can't tell which one I'm bringing up just yet. So let's. Nope, I didn't bring up the one I wanted at all. Oh my God! Well,
Um,
yeah, that's why you come to me for professional advice.
technologically inept.
Yes.
Wow.
I'm not going to say I'm any better.
All right. There we go. Okay, this is actually the second one, but the prior one, up until sometime in I guess late 2024, early 2025, this is the Dungeon Master's Guide licensing information. This it used to say there are 4 common ways publishers receive a license to create products for Dungeons and Dragons that use official intellectual property. A private license from Wizards, which by the way, they tell you ain't gonna get.
Right.
Okay.
I believe there's only 1 or 2 companies that actually have done the private license with Wizards of the Coast.
Yep. And that's what they say. It's like, yeah, you're not gonna get that. Number 2, number 2 was the open gaming license with the system resource document. What number 2 is now 5.2. Number 3 was the Creative Commons with attribution license or for publisher title on Dungeon Masters Guild.
I'm seeing a number missing. A number seems to be missing, Eric.
Well, isn't that interesting? 1, 2, 4. So
count. 1, 2, 4.
It's like the same intern that they used to back in 2020.
This poor intern that gets blamed for everything that was.
The one that had the same disclaimer on all the legacy products.
That's why they're still an intern.
You know what? Every time we have this discussion, there's only one thing that I can think of, which is it's Baldric. It's Baldric it's Baldric from all the Blackadder, right?
Oh my God!
Baldric is roaming around WotC just trying to, and somebody's lashing him right now as we speak, saying, "You fool! You left out number 3."
Well, Joe Block actually he's the one that found this. So, and he told me about it, and I was like, "Holy, that's stupid!" And they go, "And sloppy," and he's like, "Yes." So Joe was concerned. Okay, and Joe was concerned because, as he put it, he wasn't sure what that meant for stuff that was already published on the DM's Guild under the OGL. But not only that, more importantly, this isn't even telling you how you can publish on the DM's Guild. It's just telling you how you can commonly publish material compatible with D&D. And of course, the fourth was you can use the DM's Guild, which allows you access to like beholders and illithids and crap like that. Well, they went in, and after a back and forth with Joe today, because I talked with Joe, they updated it again. And the new update only has 2 common ways. And those 2 common ways are the private license, which isn't common, the Creative Commons, and then as like I guess not a common way is the DM's Guild, but it shows me, and again, Joe agreed with me when we discussed this, that WotC is doing whatever they can to scrape the OGL. The OGL is not a common way to publish any material for D&D. So, and I sincerely have little faith in ever seeing an SRD under the Creative Commons for 3.5 or future or modern 3.5 SRDs. Don't expect it, folks. I know the old regime promised it, but don't expect it. But yeah, this is how do you go in and change a document? And by the way, there was no announcement, but you change the licensing and you actually skip a number.
Because you're getting it out there as quick, you're scrubbing it as quick as possible. You're going to come back later and fix it up. But for the moment, they said, get that off the site now. We want it off now. And we'll fix it when we get a chance to fix it. But I don't understand why that would have to be gone that quick. Was there some ulterior motive that we have to get it off right now? We got to get it off right now. Why? Well, I mean, I don't know.
That almost exactly coincides with the release of the new SRD, the 3.1 SR 3.51, whatever it is, 3.2, the new SRD for D&D 2024, that pretty much coincides. I should say, by the way, the new and I looked at it earlier today, the new licensing information links to two SRDs, the 5.2 and the 5.21, which apparently are both valid. So yeah, Bill, we're sticking with the OGL. That's Bill Barsh, Pace of the Games, not using the new SRD. So
they still haven't actually. They haven't technically gotten rid of the OGL.
No.
Still, they still haven't gotten rid of it.
But they're just kind of like trying to hide it. Like you wouldn't want to publish under the OGL. Why would? That's not a common way. It's an uncommon way. The OGL is uncommon, maybe even rare, legendary. I think it's legendary at this point. But we lost Mike's video.
So if there's one thing that can help me with my insomnia, it's a long discussion about the OGL and the SRD. I think we see where most people lean. I think they're going to use OGL. I don't think the SR. I don't think it has the same appeal, which is fine. I just, all of this is tedious to me. I respect more and more people who develop their own systems or look for alternatives, because this horseshit isn't going away. They're just going to continue to tweak at this and so on and so forth. I do dearly love that Baldric the intern, who that's now how I will refer to him.
Baldric, yes.
Baldric the intern left the number 3 out because they were in such a hurry to get this document out that they dare not proofread it.
No, God forbid.
God forbid you actually proofread the document that you're putting out there. And when we first were talking about stuff we were going to talk about this week, when this came up and I saw that it was something, I mean, I almost wanted to save this until later tonight when I needed help falling asleep, and then I could read about the OGL and the. No, I mean, I have so little to contribute on this. I apologize, but I think all of us, we just expect WotC to continue to just do this and do this and do this. And I like Baldric. The best thing that came out of our discussion about this tonight is Baldric the intern. That's my new highlight, right? Baldric the intern at WotC. I've got them numbered, sir.
I can write the new rules. Put me on the VTT. Put me on the VTT. That's where it was going.
Yes.
And we get into the lawyer talking about the Creative Commons. You license everything if you use the Creative Commons 4.0 unless you draft a custom section excluding certain content. So yeah, ouch. They'll fix it in a post. They did, Waffles.
That's like trying to say you're married via mail order. Good luck. I got nothing. Yes, I don't doubt that for 1 second that Ty Beard is Lord Flashheart. I would rather be Flashman, but that's something for another time. I don't know. What else have we got? Can we just please God move on from this, because this is just going to suck the life out of all.
All right. Look, Osric 3.0 just released in Kickstarter. It's Kickstarter.
Oh my God!
Osric 3.0, which looks really cool. I love Matt's work. I may only look for the PDF just because I can't ever read any of Matt's recent work.
They're too heavy to pick up.
Well, no, it's the font. I can't. My eyes. I refuse to.
Oh my God! No, this is
a cloud just now.
This
I'm sorry.
Yeah,
it isn't tiny font. No, please don't tell me it's not tiny font again.
It's got to be a tiny font again. It always is.
Tiny
Matt,
font, tiny
Matt,
font.
call me Matt, because this tiny font stuff has got to stop. Your target audience can't read
Jesus
this.
Christ, you two, would you just go ahead and get the bifocals and
I
quit
have my
bitching?
bifocals, but I don't like to use them for the bifocal part.
I'd like to welcome you to Old Men Scream at the Clouds,
You know,
Jack.
I'm just,
No,
for
Glenn
some
and I.
reason, how did Kelsey figure it out? Kelsey, I
Oh my
can read her
God,
through my
yes.
glasses. I don't understand how these people can figure it out. It needs
I don't know.
to
Let
be
me look. I
readable
think I
by
got
old
mine.
farts. Old
Um,
farts need to be able to read this.
So Cooperative Waffles, Osric is releasing under I don't know, a mishmash of the Creative Commons and his Mythmir's Elf license, AELF. I think it's pronounced Elf, but he has his own license. So and a quick history of Osric
yeah,
is
go ahead and tell. Yeah, that's a good thing. Throw the history of Osric
the
out
quick history of Osric is Osric 1.0 was prepared as a document for multiple reasons. But the main reason was for publishers, third-party publishers, to produce material compatible with 1E without having to say compatible with AD&D 1E because WotC would get all upset. So it was going to be compatible with Osric, which is called the old school reference index companion or whatever the rest of it is. But it's the old school reference. And what happened was
it was a way to publish 1E stuff without calling it 1E.
1E. And what happened was that old school gamers, myself included, when I came back to gaming and I was running 1E, I can't read that. Can I make it big? Can I embiggen you? I'm going to embiggen you.
Yeah, that's like 8-point typeface. That's
Yeah.
a brutal one.
Yeah. I just.
But it's got lots of tables.
I need to know what size before I can. But what happened was I found. Oh yeah. I have like every printing of that multiple times.
Down, Tiger. Down.
I'm just saying. I love the book. I love the book. But Osric, they found, surprisingly enough, people were using it to run games, including myself.
Well, let's head back in time.
Oh yeah.
Back then, for a while, it became really difficult to get 1E rulebooks. The reason being is, for a while, WotC was offering PDFs, and they stopped in 2005. Eric, do you remember what year it was when they just nixed all the PDFs? So you couldn't get a PDF of the 1E rulebook unless you went to torrent sites or something like that.
Right.
The original copies were running, I don't know, $60 or $100 on eBay. They still are. And there wasn't a reprint. Like the anniversary reprint didn't come out till years later. So if you wanted to play 1E D&D, you were limited in how you could find the rule books. For a lot of people, this was a godsend because you didn't have to pay $60, and you didn't have to look at an old bookstore and try to. It was there. It was there, and you were able to use it to play. And of course, nowadays you have a lot more options if you want to play 1E.
And as Mike was saying too, it was the retro clone that was published in the UK or released in the UK because UK has slightly different copyright law because Stuart Marshall, along with Matt, by the way, is as a lawyer, figured that was the safe harbor to publish. And they got a letter from WotC requesting that they remove it from the market. And it was kind of like that classic movie line from the World War II, Nuts. They were just like, no, we're not going to remove it.
Yeah, Matt said we decline. We decline your offer or something like that.
Yeah.
That was it. Sorry.
And that was it.
Yeah.
And that opened the door to every other retrocon. Now, Osric then begat Osric 2.0. Because 2.0 was the revision of, holy crap, we got to actually make this more user-friendly. 1.0 was just written so people could publish material claiming compatibility, but people are actually using this. So, all right, let's make it. And I love Osric 2.0. It's a beautiful presentation of the AD&D 1E rules. I've used it at the table. It plays really well. So Osric 3.0, I believe Zatran made a comment a little bit before that he thinks it's going to be seismic. It certainly could be.
I think it's interesting, but I think we have it's a very crowded marketplace now, much more crowded than Matt. So you have to realize what Osric did, and Matt's, whether you like Matt or not, his place in the hobby is.
How do you not like Matt?
There's people that don't like him, Jim. Believe it or not, I don't know whether, but there are people. But I'm just saying is that he has a historical place in this hobby, because after Osric came out, everybody kind of looked around and said, well, if Matt and Stuart can do it, why can't I do it? And so then you had Labyrinth Lord. You had basic fantasy role-playing. Matt came out with Swords and Wizardry. You had all these retro clones became because Osric showed the way. It said that you are not going to get in trouble if you do this, if you have these rule sets. As long as you don't do this, this, and this, you're going to be okay. Because when WotC didn't go forward with any kind of, I mean, there were still old school guys, and I could name names, and I will if you corner me at a con, that said, whoa, we can't, we're not using that crazy Osric stuff because WotC's going to come down on you like a ton of bricks. Here we are 20 years later, and there's no ton of bricks anywhere. It turned out that you were absolutely perfectly legal to do what they did. And there was, like I said, there's still old timers in the hobby today. They're like, well, I'm not going to use that newfangled Swords and Wizardry stuff because I'll get in trouble. And they showed the way, and that was the way. Was that, look, if you change this, this, and this, and you don't use any of the, don't use carrion crawlers or whatever the monster of the day was, mind flayers, you're fine. And so I mean, its impact of the hobby is seismic. Absolutely seismic. And when the funny part is, being there at the time and seeing it happen, we didn't think it was that seismic. We just thought it was kind of cool. We're like, this is cool, man, that this Osric came out. You can play first edition D&D, but I've already got the books. I've already had the books over here. It's not a big deal for me. But for a lot of people, it was a big deal because they didn't have the books and they didn't have the PDFs. They didn't have copies. This was their way in. And like I said, that just opened the floodgates. The year after that, you saw the publication of all these other retro clones, and then here we are 20 years later. Look where we're at now. We've got retro clones on every street corner, begging for your, with a little tin cup, please, retro clone of the week, please, I need money. And and what retro clones have basically become is it's everybody's house rules. It's I want to play Dragon Slayer is Greg Gillespie's house rules,
which are awesome, by the way.
And so. Which, by the way,
it's the same $50 being passed from Kickstarter to Kickstarter to Kickstarter to Kickstarter to Kickstarter to Kickstarter, right? Everybody's just, oh my God, and come on, I got a shelf of them over here. I did fish out my copy of Tome of Adventure Design because I just don't think if you haven't had a chance to look through some of what Matt and Susie have created as Mythmire, you're missing out on some just amazing stuff, some absolutely home run stuff. People who don't like Matt, it's like I said, whenever I take my dog around, my dog loves to have her butt scritched. and I always say, I don't trust people who don't like their butt scritched. And if you don't like Matt, I got to just say, like, what, why? Like, I don't understand that because my God, if you thought that you had seen enough tables about halberds and in the DM's guide, oh my God, have I got tables for you, my friend. If you have always wanted to be an actuary, this is your calling, right? And it's just great. It's all just great.
Yeah, if you don't like Matt, you probably kick puppies or something like that.
Yes. Or worse, you're one of those weird old cat ladies. Or you show cats. That's it. You go around and show cats.
My
cat. Where's my cat? She went and hid when you said that.
But you don't go around to shows and show off your cat.
No, I don't bring her places. No, I don't do that.
With one of those weird cat backpacks, right? Oh God, no.
But now that you mention it, Oh,
Good
no.
luck with that.
No.
Jim Wampler learned a valuable lesson a few weeks ago
Oh,
over not taking your cat out because the cat managed to get out, and now he got his cat back. Thank
Oh,
God.
great, yeah.
But just how bad was that? That was awful. That was
Well, listen, my son had to drive a rental truck from Salt Lake City to Nashville because him and his wife, they're moving. His transfer came in a week before hers, and he goes, "Well, she can't fly with the cat. I'll take the cat with me." I love my son, but I have an experience with traveling with cats. And the one thing you don't do when you travel with cats, I don't care how long the trip is, what don't you do? You don't open up the effing carrier.
you drug them and you cover the carrier with a towel so they think it's night, and otherwise you're going to hear this the entire trip. Meow, meow,
Yep.
meow, meow
Well,
for 5 hours.
somewhere in this middle of this, 32-hour odyssey, he stopped for gas and the cat was eating. So he left the cat there eating, goes out, fills up the gas, opens up the door. The cat goes, whoop.
Yep.
Chased the cat around the gas station lot until the cat went, you want to eat food? And the cat's like, oh, you got food? Came running up, snagged the cat, and then threw it into the case. And I'm like, dude, you learned your lesson. Life lesson learned. God bless you.
I don't even open my front door with my cat around. No. If they see a shot at freedom, they're gone, man. They're not like dogs. Dogs trust you. Cats are like, yeah, maybe better out there. I don't know that it's better in here. I'm not sure. Where dogs, no, it's better in here, man.
Yeah, I don't think so. I'm gonna stay here.
Oh no, you have runaway dogs. We never had runaway dogs.
We have a Dachshund. Okay.
Oh yeah, dogs. Well, I take it back. My dogs ran down the street once.
Dachshunds, that squirrel shit you always see. She gets a scent, but you gotta pretend. You gotta play stupid. You can't chase her. You gotta go down and go, oh, you want to play? And she's like, oh yeah, sure. And running back at you, and then you snatch her up. Her harness came off once in the park, and I was like, well, what the? And I went, if I panic, she's just gonna keep running. I gotta go into that. Come on,
but my stupid dachshund. The only time it ran away was, I don't know why, we opened the door because we brought it to the vet, and decided I ain't going back to the vet, and ran out. And the thing that stopped it was about 6 houses down, a kid was eating a candy bar, and the dachshund got extremely interested in the kid sitting there eating his candy bar. And as it gazed adoringly at the candy bar, my grandson and I tackled her. Said, you're coming back home. So luckily that kid was eating a chocolate candy bar there, and the dog got interested. Otherwise, we'd still be chasing that stupid mongrel today. But that's the only time. Most of the time they know they have it pretty good in the house. Cats, I won't even get started with the story. She's not allowed out. She hasn't been out in probably 8 years. She's not allowed outside anymore.
So Ty mentions basset hounds, and we're sort of off on a tangent here, but the weirdest thing, one of the weirdest things I've ever seen in my entire life, was I was in Woodinville, Washington, and lo and behold, we stumbled into a parade of basset hounds.
Oh my!
And it was 300 plus basset hounds. And the way we figured it out, like, we saw a basset hound, and we're like, oh, cool, basset hound. And then we saw another and another. And I just want you to imagine 300 dogs that would rather be laying down and doing anything but what they were being forced to do, which was like the Baton death march of basset hounds. And they were all just like, oh God, just lay down. Oh God, please, can I just lay down? Oh God, I just want to lay down. And we were dying. We were absolutely dying laughing. We really, truly. And then somebody else mentioned huskies, and I'll tell this real quick. A friend of mine had 2 huskies in Baltimore, and he would sit on the couch, and the huskies would be flanking him, one on either side. He'd sit in the middle of the couch, and the huskies would literally have entire conversations through him, where one would go, and the other, and he said, it was like hearing 2 old women arguing constantly. You just never wanted to sit there.
They're very vocal. Yeah, I had a half husky, and yes, it's the most vocal dog I've ever had.
They desperately wish to sing the song of their people.
They want to talk. They want to talk to you. They just don't know how to do it. But yes,
that's right.
It sounds like human.
Oh, just too crazy. So what else? So let's talk about Raffam. Let's talk about Raffam.
Oh God, yeah.
So Raffam shut its doors this week. Pretty heartbreaking. This has been a long time coming. Bob Murch from Pulp Heroes wrote a very, very nice piece today that I read and was just a gut punch. But Raffam, if you didn't know, Raffam was a distributor for a lot of the Reaper line north of the border. So stores in Canada would order Reaper products from Raffam, and so back 6-7 years ago, there were problems getting stock in Canada from Raffam. Like they owed Reaper money. I think they owed some money to Reaper, and that was one reason why they weren't getting product. There was just a lot of tough stuff. Now, I remember the heyday 35 years ago when Raffam was releasing sculpts that were just breathtaking. They were just out of nowhere. They were better than Grenadier. They were better than Ral Partha. They were better than a lot of the alternatives. And so it's really sad to see Raffam go. I know they were trying to sell the business. They were trying to sell the molds. I think they wanted 60,000 US, which is a big number, but for what all that IP is and all those molds and sculpts and everything else, it's really heartbreaking. My guess is we will see somebody at some point that will take it on. I wasn't aware of Alarms and Excursions ceasing. Did you guys know that?
No,
I hadn't heard that either. That's pretty tough.
Rob.
And come on, things can't go on forever. I think that's
Well,
one of the
I think the miniature era might be over, Jim. I mean, really, when it comes to now,
I'm sorry.
I'm not
What did you say?
No, okay, hold on. Besides Warhammer and BattleTechie, the miniature era for regular games may be over, and by that I mean that most people I know that play, they use plastic miniatures now, or they use digital tokens. I don't know a lot of people that are still go old school like we do when they're playing D&D and use lead or pewter painted miniatures.
All right, hold on.
I do. I still do.
I got to warm up 1 second. All right, Mike, you ignorant slut. So I agree that most of the I think metal miniatures are being outsold by plastic and 3D printed miniatures. I think a lot of the miniatures community has already moved into the all printed at home. I think that wisely, a lot of the metal miniature companies are moving past metal in some way, shape, or form. You're seeing more resin and so on and so forth. I've spoken before of my problems with Kingdom Death, which is I'm addicted to Kingdom Death, and none of their stuff is metal. Raffam was one of the last survivors of that heyday period of, Ral Partha is operating, but I don't know how much volume Ral Partha actually really does compared to where it was at the highlight 40 years ago, 45, 50 years ago, 45 years ago. But I just don't think I agree with you that metal miniatures are sort of, again, we've talked about 1993 in New York State trying to ban lead miniatures and what that led to. There's a lot of people that hate that because the metal became more brittle and tougher to work with. But the future is here, and the future is 3D printing, and you can print at home with quality that's as high or higher than anything you can get from centrifugal spin casting.
Right.
And I love me miniatures. Anybody?
By the way, I'm saying I said this in tongue in cheek because I'm going to show you what's sitting right next to me, the table here. It's all these boxes of metal miniatures. I love metal miniatures, but I realize that they're just not selling like they used to. People aren't buying them like they used to. And really, the only time I sell a lot of miniatures on eBay, and what I sell now go to other collectors. And I'll even sometimes ask them, hey, you good planning to paint that? No, they just collect them in the book. I just put a bunch of blister pack Ral Partha up today. And it's just one part. Look, there's a lot of hobbies like that, or a lot of portions of hobbies that are like that are just going to slowly, fade out. I mean, remember, look, I think there'd be a time when Dwarven Forge, as cool as Dwarven Forge is, it may be a time people don't need Dwarven Forge anymore.
I genuinely feel bad for Stefan because I can't imagine he has it coming to him less at conventions. I'm sure it's more, which is I'm sure he overhears people say, yeah, I print that all at home. And that's the thing that has always been there for me, is that I love me Dwarven Forge. I think it's amazing, but 3D printer go burr and make as many as I want. And I've had this conversation. I pick up a piece of painted Dwarven Forge the same way I pick up a painted WizKids miniature, right? Any of the Dungeons and Dragons pre-paints. And folks, I say this with no animosity towards anybody, but if you look at the WizKids minis, if you
David Thompson, this is for you, David Thompson. I've got it.
But if you look at this stuff, all the stuff that's pre-painted is, in Dwarven Forge, is 3 to 4 colors max on the miniature or on the terrain. And as bad a painter as I am, I mean, no offense, shit, I can do this at home. And I can come up with something that looks as good as what pre-paints are selling.
It's just technology has reached a certain point where, like Jim said, I mean, if you want to, I love Dwarven Forge. I'm a huge Dwarven Forge lover, but guess what? I started selling a few years ago, all my Dwarven Forge. Why? Because I don't use it that much. We kind of got back to minimalist, just drawing on a big sheet of graph paper. And the Dwarven Forge, as beautiful as it is, it requires setup and storage, and it takes up a lot of space. And as Jim said, you can print out a lot of stuff now on your 3D printer.
Oh my God. Like I love you, Mike, but I've even moved to a lower grade of drawing on the table, which is Christmas paper with the grid on the back that I pick up for 90% off at Target.
I still use the whatever the mats, the crystal cast mats.
No, they're too expensive. I'm too cheap.
Dude, I have like a dozen of them. I bought them all during the years. Who knows why I got them now? But we use them, and you just use, dry. Some are dry erase, some are wet erase. Do not mix up the two. You will regret it. And that's what we use now. And the Dwarven Forge was sitting in a corner for years, and I finally just started selling it at amazing prices. But I mean, I wasn't going to use it. The same with miniatures. I have more miniatures now than I could. If I could never use the miniatures. I don't even paint anymore. I don't paint them at all anymore. The plastic miniatures are fun. Look, if I want something giant, I don't pull out my beautiful Ralpartha metal painted miniature because I don't want to break it. I pull out one of the plastic WizKids ones. Here's a dragon. Yeah. I mean, look, if I want to fight a Balrog, I've got a plastic Balrog here. Look, I dropped it in the ground. Oh no. Yeah, see, I don't have to worry about dropping my Ralpartha 1979 Balrog and breaking it to pieces. And that's just the advantage to using the plastic. And so our rule is we use metal. Our characters have to be metal painted, but all the monsters are plastic now because it's just we don't want.
So let me throw something out, right? Like, my late father gave me my first miniatures ever. They were U.S. Continental Revolutionary War, and they were painted. I still have most of them. I haven't lost them. I still have them all this time later. I think he gave them to me for Christmas in 3rd grade. And I'm a guy still trying to complete my collection of Advanced Dungeons and Dragons gold box sets. I have most of them. I'm just down to a couple that I need. And I want to get nice ones where the foam isn't rotted and they still have the paper sheets. Every year for Christmas, and anybody who knows me has heard me proselytize about this, every year for Christmas, I buy myself one blister of John Carter Warlord of Mars figures from Heritage because I couldn't get them as a kid. I couldn't afford them as a kid. And now as a Christmas present to myself, I buy one blister that I don't already own every year. And I've been working on chipping that away. I collect Gamma World, the Grenadier Gamma World miniatures, but they're so effing hard to get that I struggle. And you know what? I'll never complete the collection before I die, but I've been chipping away at it for 30 years, 40 years. I like this. I love this hobby, right? I've had to limit myself. Now, I couldn't afford a lot of miniatures as a kid. Somebody was talking about they have thousands. David Thompson said he's got like 5,000 miniatures. Good on you, bud. Like, good on you. And I get it, right? But what haunts me, and is always that monkey on my back right now. My father used to say, there's only 2 stages in life, accumulation and dispersal. And you'd rather be in charge of the dispersal than somebody else fire sailing it. And that's what keeps me focused on not accumulating piles and piles and piles and piles.
Well, kind of the topic we've talked about several times, Jim, about what happens to all your stuff when you're gone. Of all the stuff I want to leave my wife and kids, God knows I don't want to leave them thousands of metal miniatures because they wouldn't have a clue. And so I've been selling. I just showed David Tops was talking about his blisters. These are the blisters I have. These are just Ralparthas that I have on eBay. And I've just been trying to put it up. I figure if I can't enjoy it, somebody else can enjoy it. I bought them with the thought that someday I would have somebody paint them because I'm not going to paint them. I'm terrible. And I thought I'll have somebody paint these for me someday. And, time just has a way of getting past you. And now if I want a Balrog, I'll pull that plastic Balrog off the shelf and not worry about the painted Balrog anymore. And so, yeah, getting rid of my miniatures has been a big focus the last few years because that's one thing I don't want my family to have to deal with. Because what will happen? Here's what's going to happen, Jim. You know what's going to happen? They're going to put it all in a big pile, and they're going to take a picture of it, and it's going to say 1,800 miniatures, metal, random,
$10.
every kind. Yeah, opening bid $10, and it'll sell for something. And then they'll throw it all in a box and mail it away. So what's the point of that? I'd rather have it. I sell my pieces individually. A lot of times people will thank me. I just sold a bunch of single grenadiers, and a guy thanked me because remember the classic grenadier troll that came from the swamp gold box or whatever? He said, I have been looking for I want a whole troll army. And that's the troll. That's the troll I grew up with. That's the troll I wanted. And I had 2 of them up on eBay. He was absolutely happy to buy them for $9.99 a piece. And I felt good because I gave him something he wanted. And now we both have something. I've got $20. He's got 2 troll minis that he can do whatever he wants with. That's
right. And I guess what I would say, the business about RAFM going out of business and Alarms and Excursions going out of business, this is just part of the cycle of life, and I wish it wasn't the case, but it is. I was sad to see it. I sold a lot of RAFM in my store. We sold tons as an alternative to what, at the time the AD&D miniatures were sort of weak. Reaper hadn't really come along. Reaper wasn't around yet. And so I have a soft spot in my heart for RAFM, and hearing that they're out of business now, I'm just, it's kind of tough, but it is what it is, right? We don't live forever. And
didn't RAFM, didn't they buy some other assets the last few years? Didn't they bought some?
I'll be honest, I haven't followed them in a long time.
Yeah, I know
they're selling 3D models. They're selling models for printing, for 3D printing. But they're 15 millimeters, which I don't understand. And I took a look at them, and they're not something that I would be not. I mean, my God, if it's the golden age of role playing, it's the golden age of miniature gaming, because I can go on my mini factory, and Jesus, there's so much great stuff at such cheap prices. I could print an entire army of Orcuses at this point, and I'm good.
It'll be sad to see that stuff go. Like I said, I'm shocked that Alarms Excursion was still being published. I did not know. I knew that Lee Gold was still selling. She finally started selling old issues, which is awesome because if you have the time and the money, and I believe she still sells photocopies of the old issues. Do yourself a gigantic favor and buy the first couple of years of Alarms Excursions in the 70s. The wealth of gaming knowledge in there is unbelievable. And you will see the hobby as it was first starting out, what people were doing, what they were thinking. I had a copy of, I want to say, the first 20 issues of Alarms and Excursions that I got when I bought a collection years ago. And I will tell you, my education of the hobby was so increased just by reading those. It was amazing. It was like I was there. It was like I was there in 1977 or 78 reading these guys going, look, I had this class called the Pyromancer, and here's what it does. And then there's articles from Steve Marsh in there throwing stuff out. I mean, just some of the most famous people in the hobby used to contribute to Alarms Excursions. Do yourself a favor and look for some of those old issues because it's really an education. It's an education into the into the beginnings of the hobby, and you will see what these guys. You get excited reading it. You see why they were so excited. Here's this game where I can do anything. And if I want to, I can create a pyromancer, a mage that throws fire spells. I can do whatever I want to do. If I want to create a monster that flies and turns invisible and bites people in half, I can do that. That's all in those early issues of Alarms Excursions. And it just really, Gary Gygax wrote a few letters in there. At first, he was very, very excited, and then he got less excited as time went on. He wanted less and less to do with Alarms Excursions, but his first few letters were effusive with praise. He was like, "Oh, this is what the hobby should be: everybody getting together and contributing." And by issue 20, it's like, "Stop doing this! I don't want these variations of my characters in here." But it's cool to watch that evolution, of the hobby. So, if you haven't read any early issues of Alarms Excursions, or just any at all, you're missing something. Let me tell you, you really are.
So let me throw out. This is a great thing to sort of end on, if nobody else has got anything. But let me just throw out that this week something wonderful landed at my local comic book store. The first issue of the new Heavy Metal magazine.
Oh crap!
Well, they restarted it. Yes, they restarted it, right?
And I picked it up today. I haven't had a chance to crack it. I'm super excited. I hope that it lives up to what I remember, which is, frankly, R and sometimes almost X-rated comic books. But if you have fond memories of Heavy Metal from back in the day, if you loved Mobius, if you loved all of it, I'm very hopeful. This looks like a good start to the new launch of the magazine.
I was looking. I have the very first issue of Heavy Metal that I found in my collection on the shelf here, and I can't find it now. I forgot I even had it, but I had the first issue of the original Heavy Metal. But that was the magazine we read when we were in high school, and because it was adult.
That's right.
Because
and Epic Illustrated tried to compete with them.
You saw boobies, but you didn't have to go buy a Playboy. You could just buy a Heavy Metal.
They were comic book boobies.
Comic book boobies, but
equally gravity defying, but still,
you're not that picky when you're 14 years old. Boobies are boobies, so whatever. Yeah. And so yes, if Heavy Metal has if you're in high school in the 70s, yes, it has a big
so here I'll make my plug. Right, everybody is familiar with the Heavy Metal movie, okay. And everybody has fond memories of various pieces of that movie. I actually have a couple of animation cells of Tarna, the main character from the bit at the end of the movie. But I wanted to do a shout out. If you want, like really and truly, most people lean heavily towards the Conan the Barbarian soundtrack by Basil Paldoris. That's so good. But the one that you don't remember, because it was really impossible to find for the longest time. I think Inarada has it, but you need to look up the Elmer Bernstein score for Heavy Metal. Because really and truly, my friends, for all that you love the Conan the Barbarian soundtrack, if you have not listened to Elmer Bernstein's Heavy Metal score, not the rock and roll album that was the soundtrack that was also released, you want to look for Elmer Bernstein's Heavy Metal score. It is spectacular. I cannot recommend it highly enough. It's one of the greatest pieces of score work of the last 40 years. Bernstein threw himself at this with a vengeance, and it really, really shows. So go out on YouTube. I know you can look it up there. Anyway, so.
I think I found.
My God, I put them both to sleep.
I'm mad. I can't find my first issue of Heavy Metal. Now, I don't know what I did with it. I must have put it in that very safe spot when I found it. But I pride myself on having something right at hand, so I can grab it as soon as Jim mentions it and shove it up there. So I don't know. I do have the first issue of Heavy Metal around here somewhere, though. Like I said, that was when you graduated to going up and buying the Heavy Metal, and we would sneak in the back of so we had a psychology class, and me and Holland Holmes and another kid sat in the back, and Holland Holmes was an incredible artist. And I think somebody said he eventually became a commercial artist, unfortunately not a creative artist, but he probably made a lot more money as a commercial artist, I'm sure. By a faction of like 100, but he would sit there and he would redraw the Heavy Metal stuff, and we'd pass it around the back of the class. Now, the story about the class is we were in a psychology class that
the rest of the kids in the class, they weren't the smartest kids in the school, let's put it that way. And the three of us were. And so the teacher pretty much told us we could do whatever we want as long as we took the tests, and because we would make straight A's in all the tests, we didn't really need to study the material. So our psychology class in the afternoon at Trinity High School consisted of me, Holland Holmes, and another kid sitting in the back, passing around heavy metal magazines and drawing pictures. Mine terrible, and the other kids are terrible, but Holland's were amazing. And well, the teacher just kind of gave us a thumbs up, like, don't bother. Yeah. As long as you don't bother me, you guys do whatever you want back there. I don't care. But yeah, so heavy metal, I'm going to have to check that out. I can't wait to go find that.
Yeah, so I'm gonna look at it after.
I think I should have had the link should be up already.
Yeah, no, I saw the link, but the one I just sent you is so I just sent Eric a link to the full. What you want to do is you want to look at
that's
full heavy metal. The full heavy metal musical score, Elmer Bernstein. Go look that up on YouTube. There's a guy who's got it linked. There you go. There's a guy who's literally put the whole damn thing up there, one after another. Play it, and if you're a fan of the movie, you'll recognize things from various scenes. But really, it's one of the best things. And if you're looking for background music for the next time you got a table full of people who are fighting kobolds and so on, have at it. You'll love it.
Wow, we jammed.
What a night!
We jammed in a lot, man.
We did a lot of stuff. We started with Judges Guild and ended with heavy metal. So there you go. That's a good evening.
Yeah, that's not bad. Truly and truly, all things considered, it could have been worse. So
coulda, shoulda, woulda. Folks, next live stream tomorrow night, 8 p.m.
Oh, by the way, Eric, are you
God,
going
somebody just referenced one of my worst jokes ever.
Eric, I was going to ask you real quick. Are you going to New York game show next week?
What the?
Apparently not.
Never heard of it.
Wait, no. You know what I'm talking about? The CNSY, whatever.
No clue.
No, don't know nothing about it, sir. Not the comic book deal, right? I refuse to go to any.
No, this is the.
Eric deigns not to be near
maybe it's
those.
Maybe it's next month.
Comic
what are we talking about here?
Central New York Con?
Yes.
Okay, that's the weekend after North Texas.
That's it. Okay, weekend after North Texas.
I'm going.
I thought it was in May, and you're right.
No, you got me confused. That's why I was like, wait.
I was confused too. Look how confused I was.
Yes, so that's the weekend after North Texas. I will be there. Greg Gillespie will be there. I think Joe the lawyer is going to be. There's going to be a bunch of people that you know from the OSR there. It's going to be a very old school con.
Well, I gave my inadvertent plug then. So yeah, check out
Friday and Saturday, the second weekend of June. If you see me and I look wasted, it's probably not the alcohol. It's probably the fact that I was in North Texas the weekend before. Fly in on
I'll be recovering.
Sunday, and then hop in the car for a 4.5-hour trip on Friday. But it should be a blast. It should be a really good time. North Texas is going to be a really good time. Greg Christopher, who you probably know from our live streams on Fridays, he'll be there. Obviously, Glenn will be there. He's a special guest.
Yep, he'll be there.
I believe Don Samora is going to be there.
Jim will be there. The guy below us will be there.
Oh, Jim's going to. Listen, if you saw me doing an auction at WizardCon, I took my inspiration by the two on the screen, and if I did 1/10 as well as either one of them, I consider it a success. So, just saying. I tried to be entertaining like these two guys are. It doesn't come as easy.
You don't have a sidekick that wears a Speedo, so that's the problem right there.
You know what? I could have gotten Don to do it, but I don't think he would.
I don't think I'd ever. No, Don was not. He has too much respect to.
Now, I will say this: if we can get James Spahn back, he'll do it.
Oh yeah, he has no pride. Zero pride. Yes.
So folks, huge thank you to Agile Monk for throwing a few coins into the tip jar, and of course we're going to thank our patron Zach Glazer, who is sponsoring our live streams. We happen to know the guy, so we don't have to talk about him too much. But
nah.
Just saying. Thank you to Mike. Thank you to Jim. Thank you to all those companies in the gaming that make our life interesting. You give us stuff to talk about. Other than that, be safe, be well. God bless. Roll this dice well and well. I'll be back tomorrow at 8 p.m. with another live.